guess probably around the time I was 5 or 6, my dad took a job with the Federal Marshal Service, and he ended up moving us to Slidell, Louisiana. We stayed there for 3 or 4 years until we moved to Alpine, Texas for his new station. During this time, unbeknownst to my parents, I would be sexually abused from the ages of 6 to 13. So after some real deep questions, they realized what had happened. And they took me, surprisingly, I thought, counselor, something's going to happen. They took me to church. And it was just a private meeting with the pastors, and they just spoke a lot of truth over me. But they had prophesied over me at the time. They're like, this is going to be used for good. God is going to use this to lead people to Christ. Would end up being baptized and accept Christ at about the age of 13. Probably right before I turned 14, we actually moved back to Abilene. So we moved away from that church family, and my family started attending Beltway. I would begin to fall away from my relationship with the Lord. And probably around 14 or so, I discovered pornography. As soon as I turned 18, I moved out. Told my parents, I was like, hey, it's time for me to do my own thing. I'm out. Moved in 2 doors down from probably the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. We get married, and pornography is still an issue at this point. And after some infertility issues, we end up actually getting pregnant and having our first child. Well, during the course of this time, I discovered alcohol, and I was all for it. And eventually, it would get to a point that the pornography just wasn't cutting it. It got to a point that it just felt like a need for more. And so I would begin sexting affairs. Now it would be all 3 of those as a daily habit, until eventually, about a year and a half later, we would go through a miscarriage. After the miscarriage, maybe 2 months later, we find out we're pregnant. And so we're nervous for the whole thing. Finally end up having our second daughter. Chapel, my daughter woke up around 1 a.m., just inconsolable. We can't figure out what's wrong. She cries till 5 in the morning. And they tell us that she is septic, she has RSV, she has a parainfluenza, which has fluid on her lungs, and there's a bacteria in the fluid eating away at her lung tissue. And apparently while at Hendricks, she suffered a lidocaine overdose. From what we're looking at, she probably has about a 20% chance to live. I walked into a chapel that they had up there and just broke down. Finally, they go to put her on ECMO, and, she takes to it. It actually goes, pretty seamlessly. Well, they tell us when we get in there, hey, we did a CT scan. We think there may be some brain damage. And they're like, all of her affected areas currently have to do with walking, thinking, speaking, hearing, and vision. She's probably going to be wheelchair bound for the rest of her life. She went from what was probably supposed to be at least a 4 to 5 months ICU stay, and she turned it into about 4 weeks. We get sent back to Abilene, and she's just constantly improving. I mean, she had to relearn how to walk again. So I've got this little miracle running around in my house, and I've got all this shame and guilt inside, and I don't know what to do with it. So what I finally resulted on is, okay, I can't come clean about this. No one will understand it. No one will be able to fathom it. And it got to a point, the sexting affairs were just not really doing it anymore, and it slowly turned into physical affairs. And due to some of the abuse from my younger years, a lot of the sexting affairs and physical affairs actually ended up being same-sex experimenting and things of that nature. It would just start to eat me up, and I would just drink more, trying to drown it. So I just resulted on I'm just going to take myself out of the equation. I grabbed my favorite handgun, grabbed my truck keys, and I'm walking to the truck, and something just hits my mind like a freight train. And it's like, just call one person. I cannot come up with a name. And all of a sudden I scroll across a name that was someone that I had made friends with while learning how to make knives. And his name was Dale White. I'm like, okay, if anybody is going to answer poorly, it's going to be this guy. So I call him up, answers on the second ring. And I word vomit through this phone, this poor guy. And now I'm waiting for it. I'm like, okay, here comes the judgment. Here comes the shame. Here we go. And this dude just begins to just speak truth over me. Starts telling me about the love of Christ, telling me that that's my only hope out of this. Now what? He's like, well, you did the hard part. You admit you needed help. But now you got to do a really hard part. You got to tell your wife. So I take off into the house. I tell her exactly as he told me to say it. And she's like, Colton, it can't be that bad. It can't be that bad. I'm like, no, it's pretty bad. And she's like, come on, it's not like you cheated on me. And my face just drops. So she sits down. She's like, all right, come on. Just spit it out. So I just start rattling off everything. Finally get done with that, and she's outside cooling off. And I call Dale. I'm like, well, she pried it out of me. And so he's just, again, pouring into me about pursuing Christ, that there's hope there. So at one point I finally text her. I'm like, look, do you want to leave? Like, I would understand if you want to leave. She's like, no, I don't want to leave. She's like, but we can't just leave it at this. We get through most of the day, and finally she texts me. She's like, look, I called your parents. They're here. When you get here, we're going to have a talk about this. And so I'm just sweating bullets. Walk inside. My parents are on the couch. Caitlin's on the couch, and they sit me on the fireplace, blow my expectations out of the water. They just begin loving on me. My dad stands up, and he's like, I thought I raised you better. I'm like, okay, there it is. There's the condemnation I'm looking for. He's like, I can't believe you thought there was ever something you could do that could make me stop loving you. We get done, he sits down. He's like, all right, well, you know what we got to do now? No, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do now. I'm obviously lost. He's like, well, tomorrow is Tuesday. That's healing prayer night at Beltway, so we're going to that. Finally get home, we all pile in one car, we go up there, and I walk in to Larry Bruner and Chris Carroll. These guys just start praying over me. They start loving up over Caitlin and I, and they're like, well, tomorrow's re-engage. Y'all should go to that. So we go to re-engage, and first night we're there, they have a testimony. Bill and Tracy Frisky. Just to see another man be so vulnerable with his story just blew me away. Our very next Wednesday, this couple gets up to tell their testimony, and this guy just starts openly sharing about his struggle with pornography. Find out that their names are Clark and Aaron Chanel. So we get done, and same thing. Like, I was like, man, that took guts. I'm gonna go up there and say thank you. So I go up there and just shake his hand. I'm like, hey man, I appreciate you sharing that. I've struggled with pornography too. I just really appreciate y'all sharing that. I go to walk away, and this bear paw just grabs my backpack. I almost come out of it. My feet leave the ground. I get pulled over back to the side of him, and he's like, no, let me get your number. Well, I take off to open group. Before I can even sit down in open group, I've got a text on my phone. It's like, hey, I'd like you to start meeting in my house. That's Fridays. Like, I have no idea what I'm getting into. Let's do it. Well, after meeting with Clark for a few months, he's like, hey, have you ever heard of boot camp? I'm like, no, never heard of boot camp. He's like, cool, you're going. Go to boot camp, and again, just like nothing I've ever experienced. September of 2022, I accepted Christ and got baptized in the Nueces River. Caitlin and I have started facilitating at Reengage. I work with men who struggle with pornography addiction. Caitlin works with women who have been hurt by pornography addiction. Walking throughout this journey, specifically within the last 2 years, I've started to redefine my definition of freedom. I'd stumble or have a slip up or whatever the case may be, and I'm just like, why is this not gone? And I felt like the enemy was just holding it over me, like, see, you ain't ever gonna leave. And I talked to Clark about it, and Clark finally hit me with it one day. He's like, what if freedom is not the lack of temptation, but what if it's the ability to say no to the temptation? Allowing the Holy Spirit to work through you and say no to that temptation. That's probably more what freedom looks like.